Where are we going to go next? That is the question. Well, Carver, we'll go to you first. I know you've spent the morning speaking to your contacts throughout the game. What have you learnt about how those events unfolded last night?
Look, when this all started to unravel yesterday, there was a frantic race to be the first to quit this breakaway league. I think the first club who had doubts, serious doubts, were Manchester City. They were followed quickly by Chelsea, and then we saw that timed announcement at 11 p.m. last night that the other four clubs had also dropped out. The reason there was a race to be first is that they thought that there was some small reputational benefit to being the first to pull out, to say, look, sorry, we made a mistake, we're out of this, forgive us. Now, what has happened this morning inside these clubs is there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of recrimination amongst the players, amongst the staff, amongst the managers, and amongst the executives as well. And a lot of this anger is being directed at a small group of owners and a small group of chief executives and senior executives who were behind this breakaway rebel pirate league. And I'm also being told this morning that it will be very difficult for some of these men who were behind this to go into meetings with the other 14 Premier League clubs, because the trust has gone. And I won't name names, but we know the top people at some of these breakaway clubs. How will they be able to go into a room face to face and deal with the other 14 clubs? I think as far as the 14 clubs are concerned, they would like some of these men removed from those clubs and fresh faces be brought in, fresh faces who are not tainted by what has happened in the last 3 days. So I think that is the general feeling amongst the 14 clubs as well. If I was one of these senior executives at the breakaway clubs, I would be very, very worried about my future this morning. Also, I'm being told that a senior executive of one of these breakaway clubs was totally sidelined by his owner. He did not know what was going on. If he had known, he would have tried to stop it. Once he found out that his club were part of this, he spent a day trying to get hold of his owner to try and find out exactly what was going on and why they had signed up to this. And another executive I've spoken to this morning is telling me that it has been 2 days of complete madness and it has totally destroyed our reputation. So I think, you know, people are trying to get us to believe that everything is fine. People have apologised, they've released statements, but behind the scenes at the breakaway clubs and at the other clubs, there is still a lot of anger, and I don't think apologies and statements are going to be enough.
Yeah, it's almost as though much is being revealed through the process, isn't it, Brian, and what's happened over the last few days about how these clubs are actually run. Look, one of the questions, I suppose, that will now arise is the question of punishment and whether there are measures to be taken by the Premier League against the 6 English sides and indeed from UEFA over this season's competition. So what do you know about that?
Well, as the chaos and confusion dies down, the dust is beginning to settle, and what we're now beginning to see is talk about what next. On the one side, there's public relations, there's PR. And whatever some supporters think about what John Henry has said in that video address, he has gone on camera and he has publicly and visibly apologised and said that he let the club down. What about the other 5? What about the other 5 owners and senior executives at those clubs? Are they going to come out and do similar? If not, why not? Supporters feel that they need answers. We've seen the response from those fan bases. They're furious and they want to know what was going on. So John Henry will feel he has addressed that at Liverpool. Let's see what happens with the other 5 clubs. What Richard Masters at the Premier League has now got to try to do is to try to bring the 20 clubs back together, because there is a very visible split. It was highlighted on the conference call yesterday. You've got 14 clubs on one side, angry, hurt, frustrated, wanting answers. You've got 6 clubs at the other side, believing that they did nothing wrong in simply exploring a potential new midweek competition. As always, this is great news for the lawyers, because what will now be happening is the legal complexities will be unpicked. What was signed? What did the clubs specifically agree to? Look at the Super League statement on Sunday. The clubs came together. They have all joined. They have agreed to establish. Well, look at the statements that they then issued last night. There were words being used, formally enacted procedures. This is legal speak. Lawyers are getting involved here. Why? What were the documents and what were they signed? And the reason that's so important is look at one of the Premier League's own rules, Premier League Rule L.9. Clubs shall not enter or play in a competition without prior written approval of the Premier League boards. Well, we know they didn't play, but we also know they didn't have the approval of the Premier League boards, given what Richard Masters and the Premier League came out to say. So what the Premier League will be doing, I'm sure, is trying to establish whether or not a rule breach has taken place. If it has, there will be pressure from some, if not all of those 14 clubs to do something about it. Otherwise, what's the point in having rules if you're not going to enforce them? It's an interesting point that Cavi made there with regards to potentially destabilising the ownership model. Good luck with that, because the Premier League is a competition organiser at the end of the day. What about the regulators? What are the Football Association saying here? They're the regulators and the governing body of English football. Could they do more within their rules with regards to the ownership of clubs? That's one for them to answer. But there's an awful lot to unpick here. And what Masters and the Premier League are going to try and attempt to do is to try and repair some of the monumental reputational damage that has been done to those 6 clubs.
You know what I would say is that these owners of these breakaway clubs have had a real rude awakening, because they have just discovered that they are not as powerful as they thought they were. And what's worse for them is, one, this crazy scheme is not working, it's dead, it's finished. Secondly, the government are now involved. They are looking into football. There are going to be big changes. There's going to be legislation. There could well be an independent regulator to make sure this doesn't happen ever again. So all these dreams they've had of setting up their own closed leagues and making billions of pounds from selling the TV rights so that people in the Far East and all over the world can watch their games and pay-per-view on their smartphones. If the government now get involved, there's a good chance that is never going to happen. I think legislation will be coming soon, because as far as the government are concerned, football cannot be run by people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing.